Welcome to a Neon Jazz interview with a real journeyman jazz guy and educator in the Kansas City scene today, along with being a very talented trumpeter and flugelhornist, Mr. Stanton Kessler. During the course of our candid interview, Stanton talks about his roots, the bands he has been in over the many years he's been here in Kansas City, the jazz cats he digs the most, the vibrant Kansas City jazz scene going strong in 2013, and many more with some surprises. Dig in.
Hello?
Stan.
Yes.
Joe Domino.
You're right on time. The sirens are going off.
I won the game show prize.
Oh, yeah.
All right. How you doing?
Good. How are
Cool.
you?
I'm great, man. You ready to go?
I am.
All right. Let's start off first thing at the Alpha. Where were you born and raised?
I was born here in Kansas City and raised here in Kansas City. I'm kind of a freak in that way. I'm a hometown boy and never left for any extended period of time.
So when did you first start playing an instrument?
8th grade. Or no, excuse me, 4th grade when I was 8.
And what'd you play?
Trumpet.
Why? Why'd you pick the trumpet?
Well, I actually started out on cornet because it was smaller and easier to play.
Sure.
I wanted to play an instrument, and it was down to trumpet or violin. And believe it or not, what inspired me to play trumpet was hearing this song by Al Hurt on the radio, which was a huge instrumental hit on AM radio back when there was such a thing.
Sure.
And it was this stupid song called Sugar Lips.
I know it.
Do you know it?
Yeah.
You know, like this. You know.
Yes.
And then followed by, what was it? There were 2 other tunes that he had hits on after that were almost the same damn tune.
Sure.
So anyway, that was it. And then I started, and I bought a couple of his records and realized what a virtuoso he was. And then then it was just other people. After that, Doc Severinsen, and then I started buying real jazz records, like Cannonball Adderley Quintet, stuff like that, and started listening to Nat Adderley, and then Miles, and Clifford Brown and Freddie Hubbard and so on, and I was hooked.
Absolutely. You had the serum.
Yeah, exactly.
So talk to me about your family. How do they influence your musical pursuits?
My grandfather was in a troop of men in World War I. This was the precursor to the USO. They didn't really have an official name, but a bunch of guys that went around to entertain the troops, put on shows, and then he sort of remained kind of a frustrated vaudevillian. He didn't really have the know-how or to really follow through and actually become a vaudeville star, but he had the passion for it, and that kind of carried over to my dad. My mom was being groomed as a concert pianist when she was young, and she was quite good. In fact, we have some old records of her playing, concertos and stuff. And then when she hit her teens, she kind of lost interest in that, and like a lot of people do, got interested in boys. So things kind of took a left turn there. But she always remained an avid listener, and up until when I was probably in my 20s, she still played a little piano. So when my brothers and I decided to take up instruments, my parents were very, very supportive, and they made us practice. Mm-hmm. Like, well, if we're gonna spend the money on your lessons, you're gonna practice every day.
Sure. And
so I have 2 younger brothers. One played trombone and one plays drums. So that was there was a lot of support.
Absolutely.
For for music.
So, talk to me about the bands that you're involved with. We got the quartet, the Sons of Brazil. Talk to me about what you're involved with now, and kind of over the years, talk about some of the bands you've been in.
Okay. Right now, I have the Sons of Brazil, which has been together for 23 years and still rolling along, playing gigs and cranking out, Brazilian jazz. I have a new band called Parallax, which involves two drummers, Ryan Lee and Brian Stever, young guys who went to UMKC together and were best friends and roommates for a while and so forth. That's a quintet. We're playing new music mostly. I have a band called Horoscope, which is a Horace Silver tribute band. That's a quintet. Then I have the Stan Kessler Quartet, which plays basically standards, and the quartet can be a trio or a duo. So that's my lineup right now. I've played in every kind of band you can think of. Rock bands. Back in the 70s, it was rock and roll and funk, and I was always in some rock band, usually playing non-top 40 music, alternative, if you will, as they call it now. But we'd be playing stuff like Little Feat or Ohio Players or stuff like that. When back in the 70s, around here, and I think in most places, the way that a lot of musicians made a good living was playing top 40 several nights a week. And there were tons of clubs and restaurants that had bands, and a lot of them were had dance floors, and you could dance or whatever. But there were just tons of places around, and there were a few agents with these stables of bands that would just rotate around. I didn't, and a lot of these bands had killer players in them, but I didn't want to do that. So I worked part-time jobs and played less, but I played in bands that played music that I was more attracted to, and original music bands as well. There was a band called Hotfoot, which was one of the best bands around back then. Then in the 80s, we started playing more jazz gigs and putting together other groups. I had a band called 8 Ball. That was an 8-piece band that played stuff like Sons of Champlin and everything from like Sam and Dave to Sons of Champlin to Earth, Wind and Fire. But then, the dance bands and the rock bands started to drop off a little bit, and this town became more of a jazz town again. And so I played at the Point 2 nights a week, and then 4 nights a week at the Point, with a quartet, which included, among other people, Steve Cardenas on guitar, who's kind of a big deal right now. He's playing with some heavies around the world, and then I was in a band in the 80s, probably the best dance band I've ever played in and maybe ever heard. I can tell you the truth. A band called Baby Leroy, which had some guys in it that I still play with. I mean, there was Doug Allwater on drums and Gary Helm on bass, who now plays percussion in the Sons of Brazil, and Jimmy Dykes was one of the singers, and Becky Reed was a singer, and we would play places like Blaney's and pack the place, and other places around town, like the Walrus Inn or Parody Hall or whatever.
Sure.
And some traveling in the region, and that band was just so great. But after a while, I got kind of burnt out on that scene. The dance, the sort of, I hate to say it, but places that smell like beer. When you walk in to set up, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Nobody's even there.
Yeah.
Oh, the bar was enough to just like, wow, this is not pleasant.
Yeah.
Once you start playing, you forget about all that stuff. So, then I don't want to leave anybody out. I'm trying to think here. I'm not bragging, but I've been in a lot of groups and led a lot of groups. One of the things about, there was a band called the Flat Five, which is really kind of the first jazz band that I led. The Stan Kessler and the Flat Five that had Bob Bowman and Steve Cardenas and Paul Smith and Ron Vincent on drums, who ended up playing with Jerry Mulligan. And that was a band that was bequeathed to me by Gary Sibbles. This was late 70s.
Yeah.
So, and I was kind of scared to death. For a number of reasons. One, I'd never led a band like that, and two, I felt like I was the worst player in the band. Like, what am I doing with these guys? Oh, Dave Brandon was on saxes. He's in New York now. So, it was a time to learn and a time to grow and get my ass kicked, which was good.
Yeah.
And there was, after Baby Leroy, it was, salsa groups. I started playing a lot of salsa bands, which was a blast.
Sure.
There was a killer band here in town called Sensacion Caribe. It was like a 9 or 10 piece band, 4 horns, and great singers and great percussionists and great rhythm section. That band was a hoot, and then that band actually evolved, or devolved maybe is the right word. It broke up and then kind of reformed with some of the same guys under Michael De Leon, who's still around Kansas City playing his ass off and having fun, doing salsa gigs.
Sure.
That band was called Mambo X, and then that was great. I mean, salsa music was so much fun. Mm-hmm. And then a bolt of lightning hit me from above, and that was Brazilian music. And even though I had heard Brazilian music way back in high school, we all did, with Getz and Gilberto and Jobim albums in the late 50s. I mean, that was, the Bossa Nova thing was big. But in 91, our drummer, Doug Allwater, drummer in Sons of Brazil, took his first trip to Rio de Janeiro and came back with an armload of recordings and fake books that just kind of blew our minds, to tell you the truth. We were already playing together as a quartet, myself and Doug and Danny Embry and Greg Whitfield. And Doug made us a compilation of his favorite tunes from these recordings, and we just kind of all looked at each other and said, well, let's have a band that plays this music and try to sound like Brazilians.
Sure. That
was the key. Try to sound authentic.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll get a few gigs.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that band has succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. So
cool.
We're still doing it.
Very cool. So you're also a teacher too. You have a position at UMKC in Missouri Western. What does teaching mean to you?
Right now, it's something I really enjoy doing. It's a way for me to pass on what I think I know, but I just feel like teaching in a different way than performance is a way to maybe make the planet a better place in some way. Mm-hmm. I mean, if somebody, I love passing on what I know to somebody who is passionate about it, and when they get excited, and watching somebody grow and being somewhat responsible for that is just so exciting and so fulfilling. The funny thing is, I resisted it for years because I didn't think I had anything to say, and I wasn't organized.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a system, and so I rather than teach, I would work part-time jobs. Mm-hmm. And since my father was a grocer and I grew up in the grocery business, then oftentimes that's where I would end up, in a grocery store or a health food store or whatever. But finally got tired of stocking groceries and going to gigs tired.
Yeah.
You know?
Uh-huh.
So I decided to give it a shot. And after about a year of learning, you know, learning, first of all, I realized I had a lot more to say than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, getting myself organized and getting a system going. And I mostly teach jazz improvisation and theory, but some trumpet instruction always ends up being part of it. Although I've had every instrument come to me. I mean, I've taught drummers and guitar players and bass players and piano players have come to me because it's really the same stuff for anybody as far as the theory and the way to approach improvisation. Doesn't really matter what instrument you play. So
sure.
But I really like it. It just makes me feel like I'm doing something worthwhile, I guess, you know?
Absolutely.
It just does. And I remember what it was like when I had teachers that inspired me and helped me, and so you don't forget that, you know?
Absolutely. So, other than Kansas City, obviously, where have you performed at around the country and around the world?
I just did a trip to Paraguay last September. It was a jazz festival in the capital, Asunción. I went with Joe Cartwright and his quartet, and that was an amazing experience. Really good festival, really great people. I played in Europe, but it wasn't really a jazz gig. I went there with the Youth Symphony of Kansas City in 1969. I know I'm really dating myself now. But played a little bit in Chicago, played in Spokane several times, jazz festival there, and you know, all over the region here in the Midwest, Lincoln, Omaha, Columbia, St. Louis, of course Lawrence, and so on, Wichita. Don't travel as much as a lot of other people do. Mm-hmm. I kind of like it here.
Sure.
I like sleeping in my own bed, and
it's nice.
Yeah, I mean it is. A lot of the guys I know are much more road dog than I am, and so you know, and I love traveling. Is not an issue as long as for me, as long as I'm getting paid something, you know.
Absolutely.
As long as it's worth it. But I'd like to do more.
So speaking of more and local, what are some of your favorite venues to play here in KC?
There's several right now. It's kind of new places popping up. The Blue Room, Take 5, Coffee Bar out in South Leawood. It's right at the top of the list. I love that place. Blue Room is great because it's, you know, down at the museum and it's in like a showcase room. Mm-hmm. There's a new place called the Green Lady Lounge at 18th and Grand. That's really reminds me a lot of the Green Mill in Chicago. It's kind of real classy, but warm and earthy at the same time. Kind of a, you know, dark and elegant place. Mm-hmm. That's going to be even cooler when they get their downstairs room finished. They're going to have the bands downstairs eventually. Those are probably three of my favorite places. There are other places I play that I very much enjoy. The Majestic restaurant, this new place in Waldo called Louis Wine Dive. It's very promising. I played there a couple of times and had a good time. So,
Sure.
It's always in flux, and there's always there's some outdoor gigs that I really enjoy coming up in this summer.
Sure.
We do every year. So.
Cool. Let me ask you this. It seems like there's a resurgence of the local Kansas City jazz scene.
Absolutely is.
How do you feel about it? Tell me what's going on.
Okay, that's an excellent question. Because usually the question I get is jazz dead? Which is like, no.
No.
Open your eyes.
That's right.
There's a couple of things that have happened. And there's as far as the jazz scene in Kansas City, as I see it, there's 3 or 4 sort of factions. One which was always there, which is, the older established players that are still playing. Then you have, with Bobby Watson over at UMKC, he's been so great at recruiting talent there. And a lot of those guys stay here, and they work. And so there's this group of ex-UMKC players who are just killer,
Mm-hmm.
I could name a few, and I'm afraid to do that because I'm going to leave the guys out. But
Sure.
Guys like Herman Mahari, who's one of my ex-students, Clint Ashlock, another ex-student, Steve Lambert, Ben Leifer, Brian Stever, Ryan Lee, on and on and on. These guys are out there tearing it up.
Yeah.
And then and they weren't there before, so, and they're not really, they're not really taking gigs away from other people. They're creating their own work.
Sure.
For the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other faction is this group of guys who are play at the Record Bar and play at Grunauer and places like that. Basically, I'm talking about Jeff Harshbarger and the different groups that he has, and there's Brad Cox with the People's Liberation Big Band, which I sub in sometimes, and there's Mark Sutherland, who does a lot of not just music but performance art, and those guys are connected with not just the musical community but the dance and art community in town. Mm-hmm. So that's a whole nother, thing. And so you got these 3 things, these 3 factions or 3 kind of not really cliques, but just groups of people doing their thing, and sometimes they overlap.
Yeah.
And so they're, and again, they're creating their own work.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really taking work away from other people.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Record Bar has become a place where you can go at least 2 Sundays a month, sometimes more, where you can see really good new jazz, new stuff.
Sure.
So that appeals to another group of people as well, as far as listeners go. People that wouldn't want to go see necessarily hear a band that just plays bebop. They would go hear those guys because what they play is in some ways more diverse. They're
Sure.
not not afraid to try things or pull in the influences from everywhere musically. So it's quite stimulating. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So talk to me about some of your jazz heroes.
Okay. Well, I had mentioned 3 of them, and then my big 3 as far as trumpet players would be Clifford Brown, Miles Davis, and Freddie Hubbard. Those are, and then there's, trumpet player-wise, there's hundreds of people that I've been influenced by, but those are the big ones.
Sure.
And also just people like, of course, John Coltrane, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, Wayne Shorter, As far as writers go, my two favorite jazz writers would be Wayne Shorter and Chick Corea. I have a lot of their stuff in my book. It's fun stuff to play and challenging. Let's see. Gosh, there's a lot of them. Wes Montgomery on guitar, you know. I think he was huge. Man, it's pretty fast. I don't know where to draw the line, you know. Some of the guys that are playing now, I mean, cats like Chris Potter and Dave Douglas and Nicholas Payton, you know, drummers like Elvin Jones and Jack DeChanette, and there's so many younger guys out there now, Brian Blade and Bill Stewart. I mean, I really my heroes, if you will, cross boundaries as far as instruments go. I mean, a lot of my heroes are not trumpet players. So
sure. Well, let me up the ante just a little bit here with the next question.
Okay.
If you could go back in time and meet one musician, who would it be and why?
Gosh. Awkward silence. That's a tough one. Wow. Oddly enough, it wouldn't be a jazz player. It'd probably be a classical composer or player. You know, I don't know. Maybe somebody like Stravinsky.
Interesting.
You know, because I mean, he, from what I've read, I mean, he's just a really eccentric, interesting person to begin with, and then he broke so many boundaries with his music.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the first people that came to mind. So, I mean, it's like a Rorschach test, right?
Yeah.
What do you see in this picture?
That's right.
The first thing that comes to your mind.
That's right. Is it a glass or two faces?
Yeah, right. Or it's just two dogs doing you know what, right?
Yeah. All right, let's go. Let's switch tracks here and go to an easier one. Talk to me about your accomplishments over the years and what those mean to you. I think my main accomplishment is just I'm still here playing music that I love to play. I don't really have a lot of accolades. You know, I've got a few. I mean, I've been voted best trumpet player or best band leader or best band or whatever a few times in the pitch. But I had some awards when I was in school when I was younger, but accolades, I don't know. I just think as long as people keep asking me to play with them, or as long as I can still put together great bands and have people show up and enjoy the music and show their appreciation, I mean, that's, for me, the main accolade. Cool.
You know? Pretty basic.
Very cool. I'll tell you what, so if you could look back on your life of playing and everything that you've done up to this point, is there anything that you would go back and do differently?
Kidding me? There's a couple of women I'd like to look up.
Right, there you go.
You know?
See, that's what I'm looking for, is the honesty.
What a dumbass. Could have been with her or her.
Yeah.
You blew it. Of course, there's that.
Yeah.
I suppose I probably would have tried to really a lot harder, maybe to finish school. I didn't finish school. I got disillusioned, and I ran into some people where I was going to school that really turned me off. And so maybe that, probably a couple more years of school, and I would have at least have a degree. But then, if I would have done that, I would have missed out on, some things that really helped me later on. I got most of my education, as far as jazz goes, on my own or on the street or from individuals, not at school.
Sure.
There was a guy, well, there still is. He's retired. John Elliott is his name, who was the jazz guru here in town, who taught private jazz theory and improvisation lessons to everyone. I mean, everyone over the age of, say, maybe 40 has taken from John Elliott.
Sure.
He's around town, and I mean, he was the gatekeeper of that. So that's where I learned. He set me up for the rest of my life to teach yourself, basically, and that's what I think a good teacher does.
Sure.
A good teacher teaches the student to teach themselves, because they're only with you an hour or a half hour a week.
Yeah.
The rest of the time they're on their own. You got to, And, but yeah, probably a couple more years of school, and I could have had that and had some other job opportunities, possibly. But I'm doing what I want to do.
Sure.
I don't really want to be a full-time teacher.
Right.
I'm adjunct, and I teach privately here at home, and most of my interest is in performance, so I didn't really miss out on that much.
Sure. So other than gigging locally, do you have any plans for albums or any other big things down the road?
I've always got plans for albums. Whether or not I follow through or not is another thing. My next, what I hope to do next is record my new group, Parallax. And that's what I'm trying to get together. Waiting for a couple of things to fall into place, but that would be the next project. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. So let me ask you a question here. I'm going to kind of downshift a little bit, or maybe upshift here.
Okay.
What was it like to give your autograph out for the first time?
Uncomfortable, actually. I mean, it was a combination. I had mixed feelings, really. Mixed feelings of, one, flattery, and two, kind of humility, really. Like, I'm flattered, but I'm humbled because this person values my autograph because they think I'm something that I don't really think I am. You know what I mean?
Right.
Somebody asks you for an autograph, that implies they think you're some kind of star, and I never really see myself as that.
Right.
I just continue to see myself as an aspiring musician. Kind of the same thing I've thought of myself for the last 40 years. It's just that I've accumulated a lot of experience and hopefully some wisdom along the way. But, I don't really think of myself as a star.
Very cool. Well said. What was the last album or song you listened to?
Literally?
Yes.
I was just listening to the new CD of Ulysses Owens Jr. He's the drummer that plays with Christian McBride, and I just did a concert at the Folly Theater a few weeks ago with a group that came in from New York. Was led by Matt Rabicki, the bass player, and the piano player was Christian Sands, who is Christian McBride's piano player, and the drummer was Ulysses Owens Jr., also in Christian's band. The Folly picks one more obscure artist to bring in every year for one concert of their series.
Yeah.
And they called me up, and asked if I would play on some tunes, and I said, of course, and then asked me to recommend a sax player, and so Matt Otto joined us and got to do that, and that was a real exciting and fun gig to do. And so I got his CD, and I've been listening to that. He's a great drummer, and he's got some pretty heavy cats on here. One of my favorite trumpet players, previously mentioned, Nicholas Payton, is on there.
Cool.
Let's see, Jaleel Shaw on sax, Michael Dees on trombone, and then Christian McBride on bass, Christian Sands on piano. Christian Sands is this 23-year-old pianist who plays like a 50-year-old.
Wow.
But he's got, to say the least, a bright future ahead of him. Super, and all these cats were really nice too.
That's cool.
They didn't bring any kind of New York attitude or anything. They were just nice people, and it was a real pleasure to play with them.
That always sweetens the deal, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well,
sure.
I hope so.
Yeah. I tell you what, I've come to this point, we've come to the end, and I want to ask you one final question. Okay. And I do this in the name of modern technology and brevity. Okay. So we're going to condense your life down to one sentence. In the length of a tweet, tell me who Stan is.
Wow. Stan Kessler, well, this is like an epitaph on my tombstone, right?
Well, it's a little longer than that.
A little longer than that. Let's see. I tried to make the world a better place through music and through relationships with people. The music that I played had emotional content that translated to people at a heart level. Mm-hmm. And hopefully everyone who experienced my music on a given night walked away feeling better than they felt when they got there.
Well said. Well, cool, Stan. Stay cool, man. Thanks a lot, and take it easy.
Appreciate it.
See you later.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to this Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in the Kansas City area and around the country, making the jazz craft soar. And thanks to Stanton for his time and wisdom. If you want to hear some more interviews, you can go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or visit Neon Jazz's web home at theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.